So we're going to have some extra practice of our review of working with decimals. So specifically in this video, we were working on multiplying and dividing, and so I have a bunch of examples of that. You can pause the video if you want to see them all. So this video specifically continues extra practice exercises that accompany a review video on this topic. So in the previous video, I showed how to multiply and divide decimals. So if you want to see that review video, just look in the description to find that. And you can get a free PDF version of all these problems plus an answer key at divideandconquermath.com. Just go to the review section. Everything's free. Okay, so here's what I have. So let's just jump into it now. Now, by the way, I would recommend that you try these on your own just to test yourself. And like I said, there is the answer key, but if there's one that you aren't sure how to work out, I've got you. Okay, so let's get into it. 1.2 times 5. So the way that I multiply, I set up my multiplication like this. Doesn't matter how you want to multiply these together, but remember, you're just really going to effectively do the operation of 12 times 5. So I have 5 times 2 is 10, carry the 1, and then 5 times 1 is 5, and then add the 6. Okay, so here is what 5 times 12 is. And maybe you even knew that off the top of your head. I'm just showing different ways to think about this. But ignore the decimal, and then after you've multiplied everything together, count how many decimal spots there are. So there's 1 decimal spot. So pretend there's an invisible decimal here, and then move it up 1. So this will just be 6.0, and so this just equals 6. Okay, so let's do that again for 3.24 times 1.5. So again, I'm going to ignore the decimals. However you want to multiply these numbers together is up to you. But 3.24 times 1.5, I'm just going to do 324 times 15 for a moment. So I have 5 times 4 is 20, 5 times 2 is 10 plus the 2, and then 5 times 3 is 15 plus the 1. Since I'm moving now over to the tens part, I need to put a 0 as a placeholder here. So I have, let's see, 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 3 is 3. Add these all together. Okay, so I know I've seen over the years a lot of different ways that people multiply by hand. So however you did it is fine. But you should have gotten 4,860 before we do anything with the decimals. Now I count how many decimal spots there are. There are 1, 2, 3 spots. So starting here, I'm going to move this up 1, 2, 3 spots. So the final answer here is 4.86. Okay, so up next I have 7 times 1.22. So I'm just going to streamline some of this, but so 7 times 122 is 854. But then I need to count, right, these 2 spots, 1, 2. So I start here, move in 1, 2. And so 8.54 will be my answer. Okay, so the next one's going to be a little wild. So I'm going to have 1.231 times 4.01. Now I always like to have the longer number on top. That's just my preference. So okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just multiply these together by hand. So I have 1 times 1, 1 times 3, 1 times 2, and 1 times 1. So I'm done with this spot. So now I move to the next spot. This is just a 0, so I put a 0 placeholder. Everything here is just going to be zeros. And then now I'm going to move, because 0 times everything is just 0. And then I'm going to move here. So since I've now moved to the hundreds, I need 2 zeros to represent that I've moved over to the hundreds place. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 2 is 8 plus the 1. And then 4 times 1 is 4. So here's everything. So I'm going to add all of this. So this is quite the adventure. Okay, so now I've got this whole number. How many decimal spots do I need? I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal spots. That's 1, 2, start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here's where my decimal spot will go. So this is 4.93631. All right, continuing on. So now I've got 0.52 times 3.1. So if I set this up, so just to save time in the video, so if I take 52 times 31, so that should get you 1,612. And so then I can see that I need 3 decimal spots, so I'm going to put a decimal right there, and it's going to be 1.612. So now we can move on to division. So I have 0.25 into 5. Okay, so we talked about in the other video that when you are dividing by a decimal, actually I'm gonna move this over here just to make my point. So when you are dividing by a decimal, there's a little trick that you can use to effectively get rid of it. And so what that trick is I'm going to take this decimal here and I'm going to move it over. So I know there's an invisible decimal here. I'm also going to move it over the same number of spots and then just put zeros as placeholders. And so now what I need to do is 25 into 500. And I know that 25 goes into 50 twice. Bring these zeros down. 25 goes into 0 times. So the answer here is 20. And there's nothing that you need to do to adjust the decimal. That is fine. And by the way, if you're finding this video helpful, I'd love it if you hit the like button. If you have any comments for me on how to make things better, I'd love to hear them. And I'd also love it if you guys could subscribe to the channel so I can keep math free. Okay, so let's keep going with this. So now I've got 2.3 divided by 1.4. So it's the same idea, right? So I'm going to set this up. And since I am dividing by a decimal, I'm going to move these decimals over 1 spot. So now what I actually want to do is 14 into 23. Now this one's also a little interesting because this is going to be a remainder, and I actually didn't talk about what to do with a remainder in the other video. I just decided I would leave it for here. So 14 goes into 23 one time. So if I subtract off this 14, this is 9. Okay, so you can continue on with a decimal. So what we can do is I can see that I've got a remainder. So you've kind of got some options. So you can either leave it as 1 and 9 over 14, but just for the sake of doing everything in decimals, I'm going to show you how to move out a few more decimals. So I am going to now just set a decimal here and add a 0 and bring this 0 down. So now, how many times does 14 go into 90? Well, you may have to get out your fingers and toes to figure this out, but it's 6. And 6 times 14 is 84. So that's going to be with 6. And then you can just keep going with this if you wanted to. So so let's just say that I have to take this out to 2 decimal spots. So how many times does 14 go into 60? That would be 4 times. And 14 times 4 is 56. But as you can see, right, I can keep going with this. So I could just keep adding in decimals, and then I could just keep like going with this thing. I could go for forever with this thing. So I think in the answer key, I put a handful of decimals just in case you did keep going with it. This actually does not ever like terminate. So yeah, this is what we've got. So this problem is actually very similar to the next one. So if you were unsure of how to do either one of these, I'd say maybe pause and just try the next one and then hit play when you're ready. Okay, I thought I should give myself a little more space here. So, okay, so I've got 3.1 into 2.72. So first I'm going to adjust these. So I'm going to move everything over 1 spot. So now I've got 31 going into 27.2. And so, yeah, so you can see here, right? So 31 does not go into 27, so we're actually just starting right out of the gate with a decimal. And you may have had to make like a crazy guess with this. This is kind of a hard one. So 31 goes into 272 8 times. That one I really just had to like make a wild guess and play around with multiplication with it, to be honest with you. I probably wouldn't know that off the top of my head. I guess I would think, what is the closest that I get to 272 by 30? I can easily do 8 times 30. 8 times 30 is 240. So 8 times 31 is going to be 248. And so then, yeah, you can see that that's going to get you as close as possible. So anyways, you can make like a good guesstimate. So I'm going to subtract this off. And I have that 272 minus 248 is 24. And then it's just a matter of like, do you want to keep going? And so why don't we do this just out 3 decimal spots just for, you know, funsies. So I'm going to add in another 0. And so now how many times does 31 go into 240? Well, this would be 7 times. So 7 times 31 is going to be 217. And so then what is 240 minus 217? Well, that comes out to 23. And so then we can add in another 0. Oops. Sorry about that. Had a computer issue. But, you know, you can just keep going with this, right? And this would go in another 7 times. So this can keep going for forever. Again, I put it in a bunch of different decimal spots, but we'll just terminate it at the first 3 spots. Okay, so continuing on. So now we have 5.25 divided by 0.05. So again, I can set this up. And then we can move these decimals over 2 spots. So this one actually works out to be nice and straightforward. Might have had a similar one in the review video now that I think of it. So 5 goes into 5 once, so I can subtract off the 5. 5 goes into 2 0 times, and then I can just subtract off the 0 and bring this 2 down, and then bring the 5 all the way down, and then 5 goes into 25 5 times. So the final answer here would be 105. Moving on, so now I've got 0.03 into 3.36. Gonna move those decimals 2 spots. So now I need to compute 3 into 336, which you can kind of just tell then just from looking at it. So this is going to be 112. So I'm going to just omit the division because you can see 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into 6 twice. So 112 times. Okay, so this next one is another repeating, or not repeating, just a long decimal, depending on what you want to do with it. So I'm going to set up the problem. So I'm going to move this decimal over 2 spots. So I'm going to move this decimal over 2 spots. So I'm going to have 202 into now 420. So 202 goes into 420 twice. And so then I can subtract off 404 to get 16. Now, as you can see, 202 is not going to go into 16. So since that's not going to work, I can put a 0 here. And then I can bring a 0 down. And now we can repeat the process. So, or I'm sorry, let me repeat that part one more time. I think I said that in a confusing way. Okay, so 202, so we do this operation, so we get 16. So 16 is a remainder. So if I want to keep going, I need to add a 0. So I'm going to put a decimal spot here. I'm going to bring that 0 down. Oops, sorry about that. And so now how many times does 202 go into 160? 0 times. Okay, so then we add in another 0. And now it's how many times does 202 go into 1600? And so then you got to make a little bit of a guess for that, I suppose. So I will tell you it is 7 times. So let's see, 7 times. So that brings us to a little over 1400. It comes out to 14. And so then you can, once again, this is like one of those situations where you can just keep going with this. But I'm just going to leave it at 2.07. But as you can see, you would have to keep going, and this will just go for forever. Okay, so for the last problem, so now, let's see, I've got 0.003 into 6.09. So now, let's see, I'm going to move this decimal. Let's see, grab a different color. This 1, 2, 3 spots. So I'm going to move this also 1, 2, 3 spots. So now I need to figure out how many times does 3 go into 60, 90. And again, this is one now that I've got this all set up nicely. So 3 goes into 6 2 times, into 0 0 times, into 9 3 times, and then 0 times. So the answer here is going to be 2030. Okay, so my review series, by the way, has many other topics in it. So each topic includes a refresher video, which was the previous video, and then practice problems, which is this video. The practice problems also include their own answer key. All of this is free and organized at divideandconquermath.com. Just go to the review section and you can find everything for free. Okay, guys, I will talk to you in another video. Bye.